Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you, step by step, how to deploy a FortiGate virtual machine on EVE-NG. We'll start by downloading a FortiGate VM image compatible with EVE-NG from Fortinet support site. Then we'll upload and prepare the image in EVE-NG, create a new FortiGate node on the lab canvas, register the trial license, and finally access the FortiGate web interface. By the end of the video, we'll have a fully functional FortiGate that we can use for our lab environment. Before we begin, there are a couple of things you need. First, you need to have EVE-NG already installed and working. EVE-NG can be installed directly on bare metal, or it can run as a virtual machine using platforms such as VMware ESXi, VMware Workstation Pro, Proxmox, or other supported virtualization platforms. For this video, I'll be running EVE-NG as a virtual machine on VMware Workstation Pro on a Windows 11 host. You'll also need a CPU with Intel VTX or AMD vTechnologies support, because this FortiGate image will require hardware-assisted CPU virtualization. In my case, I'm making sure it's enabled on both the BIOS and the EVE-NG VM settings. With that out of the way, let's start with the tutorial. The first step is to download the FortiGate virtual machine image. Let's open a browser and go to Fortinet's support portal at support.fortinet.com. If you don't already have an account, you'll need to create one and log in. Once you're logged in, go to Downloads, and then select VM Images. Here, we need to select the appropriate platform. For EVE-NG, we'll use the KVM image. Under the available downloads, select the version you want to virtualize. In my case, the image I'm using is version 7.6.7. Select the new deployment of FortiGate for KVM option. Once the download is complete, we're ready to prepare the image for EVE-NG. For this part, I'm following the official EVE-NG documentation for adding Fortinet images. The documentation is available on the EVE-NG website, and I'll leave the link in the video description. As I mentioned earlier, in my lab EVE-NG is running as a virtual machine on VMware Workstation Pro, using Windows 11 as the host operating system. So, let's start by connecting to the EVE-NG command line. I'll connect to EVE-NG IP address using SSH directly from the Windows host. I'm using PowerShell for this. Use the SSH command specifying the user and IP address of the EVE-NG VM. Once connected, we'll create the directory where EVE-NG will store the FortiGate image. It's a good idea to include the FortiGate version in the directory name, especially if you plan to have multiple FortiGate versions in your lab. I'll create the following directory. Now we have a dedicated directory for our FortiGate 7.6.7 image. Next, we need to transfer the image we downloaded earlier from our Windows host to the EVE-NG virtual machine. There are several ways to do this. For example, you can use SCP directly from PowerShell, or you can use a graphical application such as WinSCP. I'll use SCP from PowerShell. First, I'll navigate to my Downloads directory. And then I'll copy the FortiGate image to the directory we just created on EVE-NG. Of course, replace the IP address with the IP address of your own EVE-NG server. Copy the complete directory path. Once the transfer finishes, we can go back to the EVE-NG CLI. I'll move into the directory where we uploaded the image. Let's verify that the file is there with ls command. Now we need to extract the zip file. I'll run the unzip command. Let's use ls again to see what we have. The extracted file is called FortiOS.qcow2. EVE-NG expects the disk image to have a specific name, so we'll rename FortiOS.qcow2 to Versia.qcow2. We can also remove the original zip file because we no longer need it. At this point, the directory should contain our Versia.qcow2 image. The final step is to fix the permissions. This updates the ownership and permissions required by EVE-NG so that custom QEMU images can start correctly and their consoles can be accessed. And that's it. Our FortiGate image is now ready to be used in EVE-NG. Now let's create a new FortiGate instance in EVE-NG. I'll start by creating a new lab. Once the lab is open, I'll right-click on the canvas and select Add a New Object, and then Node. In the Node properties, we need to configure a few parameters. For the template, I'll select Fortinet FortiGate. For the number of nodes, I'll select 1. For the image, I'll select the image we just created. I'll give the node a name. For the CPU, I'll use 1 CPU. For memory, 2048 megabytes. And finally, I'll configure 3 Ethernet interfaces. Once everything is configured, I'll click Save. Our FortiGate node has now been added to the lab. Next, we need to provide the FortiGate with network connectivity. I'll right-click on the canvas again and select Network. Define the corresponding network type, which is management in my case. This network needs to provide internet connectivity and DHCP so that the FortiGate can automatically receive an IP address. This is especially important because we'll use this connection to register the FortiGate trial license and access the web interface. Now connect FortiGate node to the network by dragging the plug icon. Leave port 1 interface selected and save this change. Our topology is now ready. Let's start the FortiGate. I'll right-click on the FortiGate node and select Start. Once the VM has started, I'll left-click the node and open the terminal client. This will give us access to the FortiGate CLI. Let's wait for the FortiGate system to completely boot up. Now let's register the FortiGate VM. When we first log in, we'll use the default credentials. The username is admin, and initially, there is no password. After logging in, FortiGate will ask us to configure a new administrator password. Once we're logged in, we can register the FortiGate VM using the trial license. For this, we need our Fortinet account credentials. We'll first enter the account email. Next, we'll configure the account password. And finally, we'll execute the license registration command. FortiGate will connect to Fortinet's licensing service and register the VM. One important thing to mention here is that the FortiGate trial license can only be used on one FortiGate instance at a time. So, if you're already using the trial license on another FortiGate VM, you'll need to decommission that instance on Fortinet support site before you can use the trial license again. Once the license is accepted, FortiGate will ask us to restart the VM. We'll accept the restart so that the trial license can be applied. Now we'll just wait. Once the FortiGate has restarted, we can access its web interface. First, we need to find out which IP address was assigned to the FortiGate through DHCP. From the CLI, we can check the interface configuration using the following command. We should be able to identify the IP address assigned to port 1. In my lab, the FortiGate received the following IP address. So I'll open a browser tab and navigate to the following HTTP site. We can proceed to the FortiGate login page. I'll enter the administrator credentials we configured earlier and log in. The first time we access the FortiGate web interface, we'll be presented with the initial setup wizard. There are a few options we need to configure. For Migrate Config with FortiConverter, I'll select Later. For Automatic Patch Upgrades, I'll select Disable. And for Dashboard Setup, I'll select Optimal. After completing the wizard, we'll arrive at the FortiGate dashboard. And that's it. We now have a fully functional FortiGate VM running on EVE-NG. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.